Join us today for this episode where you may have to answer the question, would you rather be in the passenger seat of your 80-some-year-old parent driving or somebody that's had one too many glasses of whiskey?
Welcome to Two Guys on a Porch. I'm Jason. This is Bradford. As always, we have my hunting dog, Kimber, with us, who's taking a nap. Well, we got kicked out of the whiskey house. Not really. We love going back there, but we're back on the farm. It's a little rainy today, so we're hanging out in the barn. It's easier not to get wet in the barn than the porch. The porch is kind of narrow. The wind's blowing in. Nice summer breeze for us today. But we're out here in the barn, again, talking about life. We're smoking fellowship sticks. A glass filled with something with the flavor of friendship and figuring out life. And here we are today. And where are we drinking today, Bradford?
Well, I'm going to talk about what we're drinking. We are doing Scotch today.
Yes.
And they're aged Scotch. And so part of that is a toast to my mother. Teetotaler though she was, not out of discrimination. Her comment was, I'm afraid I'd like it too much. So she never drank. But I lost my mom recently, and so we are going to cover a pretty serious topic today in how do you care for aging parents? My mother was 95 when she passed away recently. And then, as I mentioned, we do want to kind of toast her, so we're drinking Balvenie. And the Balvenie is wonderful Scotch. It was the first whiskey I ever had from a friend of ours. Shout out to Dave Schrader, who gave me their basic offering of the Balvenie Doublewood 12-year. And which is amazing. So if you want to try your first whiskey, that's a good one. And then today we're going to do the Portwood 21-year-old and the Tun 1509, which there's a little bit of a backstory on that being the genesis or part of the genesis of our podcast. And today we're smoking Montecristo 75th anniversary.
So you want to hang out with us, but before you do, be sure to stop, like, subscribe, and comment. We love to hear from you. We love doing this, sitting on a porch, or in this case, a barn today, talking about bourbons, whiskeys, in this case today, smoking cigars and talking about life. So like and subscribe, and please give me a comment. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, and maybe what you want to see in the future.
Yeah, so let's get into the topic a little bit before we talk about the whiskey. And I've had a number of people bring this up to me prior to even my mother's passing. But we talked about how to parent adult children, and I think that led into some people coming to me and going, man, I wish you'd talk about how to, like, parent your parents.
Yeah.
As they age. And my mother made it somewhat easy. She lived on her own, and even though we had people going in there about 5 days out of the week for 8 to 10 hours a day because she would forget to eat. She had dementia for the last couple of years of her life. She still lived somewhat independently.
Yeah.
We never had to make decisions to put her in a home and that type of thing. And, you know, the challenges are real because your heart wants to do everything for them, and it could wreck your life.
Yeah.
You know, we're moving my 88-year-old mother-in-law into our home. And my father had commented, because we had elderly people that he was caring for in our home, he said, I'm never living with my children because it presented such a challenge on my mom and dad's marriage, the dynamics of the family. Everything changes.
You use the word challenge. It's a hardship. It's really, really tough. I've not had to do that, but I've seen you do it, and it's tough for people.
Well, and then they have worked. They've built up a nest egg in a lot of cases. They want to leave something to their children. And then you make a decision about assisted living, and it's gone.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do with that? And there are no, this is the way to do it, answers to this question, if you will.
No, there's no, there's not a pat answer, but there are a lot of issues concerning that, because I think probably the biggest problem is the changing of roles of the child becomes the parent becomes the child, and the parent really doesn't realize their deficits. They don't realize that their thinking's off, their movements are off, they're not quite able to drive, and you love them, you want them to be safe, but where do you draw that line and say, what to do, and especially with finances, they're big boys, big girls. They've been doing this their whole life, but when do you step up and say, "Hey, enough's enough here"? That's tough.
Well, and I think the biggest fear, I think if you were to poll that generation of people in their, let's say 80s, let's say that's the mark where you begin to notice a pretty dramatic shift in, mobility and that type of thing.
Except if you're president and you're just fine.
Yes, you're just fine. But I would say their number one fear, if they're polled, is they're going to lose the ability to drive their car. They lose that level of independence.
See, that's why you can be president. You're driven around all the time. Matter of fact, you're not allowed to drive a car after you're president or when you're president.
So that would be the profession all 80-year-olds should aspire to.
Exactly, yeah. You keep on working as long as you're president.
That's great. Well, that was my dad's number one fear. And when he was diagnosed with cancer at 83, he was driving himself to the hospital. And so for all of his treatment. So he never lost that mobility. And he was really grateful for that. We kind of had that long goodbye, and that was a blessing. But he never had to deal with that, losing that independence. My grandmother was 89, got pulled over by a state trooper, and they pulled her license. I don't know what she did. I didn't want to drive with her or ride with her when she was in her late 80s.
Oh, wow.
But it made her so mad. She went and took the written and driving portion of the test and passed. Which kind of goes to, at some point, maybe they should have to take it again, right?
Yeah,
if you pass, go ahead.
At least the driving test I took was around the corner. You looped around the 7-Eleven. The DMV was down there by the 7-Eleven, and so you pull out of the DMV parking lot, make 3 rights, and you pull back around. Just go around the corner around the 7-Eleven. Not much of a driving test.
Well, whatever it was, she passed it, and she was pretty proud. We were proud of her. That was kind of cool. And then my uncle, his driving days ended when he drove into the post office. Which is pretty common for that. They get the gas pedal and the brake mixed up or forget to press one or the other. And fortunately, no one was hurt, including them. But that's not the way you want to end your driving career.
No. Well, and you love them. And so you don't want them to hurt themselves or somebody else. I mean, it's not, it's out of love and concern that you say, hey, that maybe that's not the right thing to do. The challenge, of course, in that is that, different people have different abilities at different ages. There's some people that you would, in my case, there's some people who are 80 that you have no problems taking to surgery. There's some people in their 70s or 60s you would never take to surgery because they're too invalid, too sick to go to surgery. So it's, you mentioned 86, they might be perfectly fine to keep driving at 86 for that particular person. So it's not like a government can come down or kids can come down and thou shalt not drive at this age because everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah, so we're going to circle back and talk about this as we go along, but I think it is time to take a shot of the Balvenie, but that would be disrespectful to this whiskey because this is legendary.
It's good stuff. Which one will you start with?
So I think we want to try the 21, the Portwood, which you correct me if I'm wrong, this is your favorite Scotch.
It is. I love the Balvenie 21 Portwood. I'm not sure how I got hooked into it. It probably was just simply an age statement. Typically, if you're drinking a whiskey, particularly a bourbon, it's much younger. If you're drinking Scotch, they tend to be older. But, if you buy a 25 or 20-year-old Macallan, you're paying a lot more for it. This bottle is it's not cheap. It's $200-300.
Right.
But it's 21 years old, so that's probably why I first picked it up. The next thing, I love the smoothness.
It is so good.
Yeah, it's a Scotch, light gold color, easy on the nose. The palate is always a honey, woody oak taste, and just a great finish. It doesn't have peat in the process. It's a Speyside Scotch. And so you take your malted barley, you malt it. Basically, you take your barley, get it wet, let it sprout. But that's not, sprouted barley doesn't sound as good as malted barley. But then you got to dry it out. And how do you dry it out? Typically, people just burn peat to dry it out. to arrest that malting process. In the Speyside Scotches, they don't use peat. They just use coal, anthracite coal. They put a little bit of peat in the fire to give a little bit of character to it, but as opposed to the Islay styles Scotches, they really use a lot of peat, and that's that liquid dirt taste you get. And I don't particularly like that, but the Balvenie is just gold to me. So it's cheaper than a Macallan of the same age. But it drinks just as well.
Yeah, and as a reminder, Scotch is single malt. You're not dealing with corn or other grains. The Scotch and Irish brought those technologies to the U.S. and distilled what they found here.
That's right.
Right, rye primarily is what they started with. Corn now. So this is really back to the old school original. It's one grain.
Yeah, one grain, and Balvenie does it really unique because they have a malting floor. They, Scotch is, you pointed this out before in previous episodes. You have to go back and watch that in our other Scotch episode, but it's just water, barley, and yeast. And they dry the peat. They got to dry out the barley after it's malted, and so that's where you get the peat taste in there because they're usually burning peat. In this case, again, coal. But Balvenie has a malting floor. What that is they just spread it out, and it's wet barley. They're letting it sprout or malt. It's starting to grow, but they arrest that process. But during that malting process, they got constantly turn it over, several times a day, like 4 times a day. That's a lot of work.
And I think in the research we did, there's 120 plus distilleries, and the Balvenie is one of 7 that does all 5 of kind of the rules of Scotch, if you will, that they do them all themselves. They grow their own barley malt. They dry it out. They distill it.
Cooperage. They have their own.
That's
cooperage.
right. And then they have their own master distiller. It's not done somewhere else. They don't bring somebody in. And they had a legend in Sir David Stewart.
Yes. He was actually knighted, yeah.
And I want to say he was there. I'm certain he started in 1966, and I think he just retired in 2022.
Yeah, it was recent. Kelsey McKinchney took over, but David Stewart
Did she have to have that name to get the job? You think McKinchney?
I don't think Crowther would cut it. So probably so.
McKinchney.
Yeah, that's a classic Scotch name.
No
there.
kidding.
But yeah, David Stewart was. He is credited for starting the whole casking thing. So bourbon or American
the wood finish.
Yeah, exactly. So in bourbon, by definition, you are in new oak barrels that have been charred, and they stay in that. Not so much with Scotch. Scotch is, as a matter of fact, they take those used whiskey barrels a lot of times, and they'll use those to finish their whiskeys. It induce a certain taste. David Stewart had the bright idea, let's try different barrels of different types of alcohol, spirits, and try different things. This is called Portwood because it is finished in port barrels.
Yeah, and we've had some port finish Scotches before, and it went back to the Spanish shipping those over in cask and the British not knowing what to do with them. They're like, hey, let's stick some whiskey in there. Macallan did that. And so they really kind of got into that. But David Stewart with the Balvenie really did perfect that process. It adds character because, as you pointed out, Scotch is aged longer, but it's not picking up those woody notes over time because the barrels have already been used for something.
That's right.
And so when they move it from what it was aged in to finish for a short period of time, maybe a year or 2, into something else, it just adds a little complexity and character to it. Scotch is clean because it's the one grain, and it's finished or aged in barrels that were used for something else. So it's very clean. And so when you do this, it does add something to it.
Absolutely. And for those out there paying attention and not too inebriated, you might ask, well, if they're using barrels from elsewhere, why do they need their own cooperage? And the answer to that is they're repairing barrels. They're not necessarily making barrels. They may make some new barrels, and then they start the process there, and they transfer it to used barrels. Those used barrels are just that, used, so they need a lot of, they break them down to repair them and put them back together.
Yeah, and we've talked about this too with Scotch, is that they refer to casks, which is all barrels are casks, but not all barrels, not all casks are barrels. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
So cask is a size, and barrel is a size of a cask. So that's how that's denoted, to use their terminology. Cask would be a huge barrel, if you would.
And along those lines, what we're going to taste next, what's even bigger, is a tun. A tun is just a big oak container. And so,
Now, as they say in the South, a shit ton. So I don't know how that translates to UK measurements.
Maybe that's the origin there, right there. It was a shit ton. I don't know about that, but the tun is our next Scotch is Tun 1509. This was still produced by David Stewart. There's several batches. This is batch number 1. There's no definition of a batch and size, but it's not a single barrel. It's not mass-produced millions, but it's a big container. And in the 1509, basically it's about a 8,000 liter oak. So they take all their barrels, they throw it into this, and they're different casks. I should say casks, not barrels. Different barrels, and they finish the tun. I always want to say tune because it looks like tune to me, but it's tun, pronounced tun. They finish it in the tun, which is bigger in size. The previous, they've done this series. David started this series years ago with the 1401, the same type of thing.
Right. They did 9 series of those.
Yeah, exactly. And the difference between that one and the 1509 is the tun is just a bigger container. The previous one, 1401, was 2,000. This is 8,000 because it started around. So this came out about 2015. They switched over just simply because at that time whiskey was in high demand and they're just trying to make hay while the sun's up. So they had to switch to a bigger size just to make it more available. Some people also say that this was a way to rescue defunct barrels, orphan barrels. They would take barrels that didn't make the cut originally, or for whatever reason they had the barrels left over, and they would finish them in this tun. The barrels that they were used in 1401 were older barrels, like, greater than 20 years old, like 30, 40-year-old barrels. And so some people really like that 1401 as opposed to the 1509 because now the demand went up. They couldn't sustain doing that using 40-year-old whiskeys to blend together. They had to go to younger whiskeys and a bigger container. So some people like the 1401 better than the 1509. We'll have to maybe do a taste comparison. It's going to be hard to find the 1401, though.
Yes. And before we get to that, I do want to, before I finish my cigar, I want to talk about it. So I'm about literally down to the nub here.
You've enjoyed it.
I have enjoyed it. It's a good cigar. Montecristo, 75th anniversary, and just a quick shout out to our friends at Mission Cigar and Social, where we did not purchase these, by the way, but they have just opened their store in Franklin. So we've referenced that for a while, Spring Hill and Franklin. They just opened their store in Franklin. We hope to have a chance to film there. It's really close to where I live. Monty Collins, friend of mine, and one of the proprietors there. So please join them there. But by the way, and they sell Montecristo, as most places do, because the Montecristo No. 2 is the best-selling cigar worldwide. We're enjoying just an exemplary cigar today.
Yeah, no, this is great. And again, it's the smoothness of things that I like. I mean, different people have different tastes, but very smooth cigar. It's nice finish to it.
So, back to the care for our parents through this process. I'm curious as to your thoughts from a financial standpoint. I even know with my mother, we were beginning to have those conversations, but there's an element, and we did the math with my mother-in-law. She's got just a little bit of money set aside, and the idea was, like, what kind of stewardship is it if you say, hey, we're gonna put you in assisted living. They're going to provide great care, and there are different levels of assisted living.
Sure.
But if you live longer than 3 years, you will outlive every dime you have to your name.
Yeah.
And is that a bet you're willing to make? And is it a bet you should make?
I'll even take it a step forward. I don't want to be a burden on my kids
Right.
in time. So I think, I'm not an insurance salesman, but I think long-term care insurance is a good thing to look into. I have it or had it. You pay it for a certain amount of time and pay it off. It's paid off now because got it earlier, but you're absolutely right. There's not a good way to do that, and then the alternative, I'm best on an option test, multiple option test. Option one, long-term care facility. Option two, they move into your house or a sibling's house. Three, you just leave it as is and hope for the best.
One recommendation I would make is, regardless of what you decide to do, I would advocate that the child, if you're a married couple, the child of that particular parent that you're having a conversation about needs to be the one who makes that decision and communicates. And then the other spouse needs to be aligned with that. So I'm not making decisions regarding my mother-in-law, but I'm certainly aligned with the fact that my wife and I think the best place and best decision for all concerned is to bring her into the house.
Yeah.
My wife wasn't involved in the decisions with regard to my mother. And so, but she is aligned with that. And I think if I were making decisions about my mother-in-law, that would create conflict that is unnecessary entirely.
Yeah, I think, what's the old thing in the airplanes? You got to put the face mask on yourself first, then your child. I think it's the same thing here. I'm not sure what the answer is, but you first got to keep things good with your wife, with your spouse, wife. You got to keep things good at home, and then obviously you want to honor your parents, but your first commitment is to your spouse. And so, to your point, it's got to be they've got to be involved and be good with it. We all want to honor our parents, but we don't want to destroy our marriages in the process.
Right. And I've had a number of friends who, when they detect that their parents are changing and those roles become reversed and you become the caregiver instead of the cared for, that the nursing home option becomes the best of whatever they have to choose from. But because that process eats the entirety of their remaining assets, they begin to give them away. And if enough time has passed, and it used to be 5 years, that, they sign their house over to their children. They move all of their funds, and the finances are then taken care of by their children. And so when that time comes for them to move into a nursing home, they really don't have any assets of their own and haven't for whatever legal time frame is prescribed.
And this is assuming that your parents are willing for this.
Right.
On my side of the coin, my parents are quite obstinate about it. We've got them to downsize. They had the house they had for umpteen years. They finally downsized because, any house has maintenance, and they were having trouble just maintaining their house financially and physically. Right. And so got them to downsize. But, I tried to talk to my dad before about finances and just not trying to take him over, but just, okay, Dad, if you were to, pass away suddenly, where is everything? Because I need to help take care of Mom. And he's very obstinate about that, and just knows I'm good. So it's you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, type of thing.
Well, speaking of drink, now we're going to try the Tun 1509, and quick story here that this is part of the genesis of our podcast.
It is.
And you and I were sitting on your back porch at your house, and we were trying. I don't remember, but we had 2 whiskeys.
Yep.
We had, and it was, hey, we both liked the Balvenie, so we were like, well, let's grab that. And you were like, yeah, I know it's good. I don't really remember it. And then we had something else, and I don't remember what. Do you remember what it was?
I think it was the 21 Portwood at the time.
No, it was something different than Balvenie.
Okay. I don't remember.
And it may have been another Scotch. But anyway, we tried that first, and we were like, oh, this is good. And we're not experts, so it's good, bad.
Yeah.
And so it was good. And then we tasted the Tun 1509, and we were both like, whoa, this is something different.
Yeah, this is excellent. So,
to finish the story was the idea, like, we're not experts, but we know good from really good, so we may have something to share.
Absolutely, yes. That's part of the practice of becoming expert. You drink a bunch of different things, figure out what you like and what you don't like. This is definitely a step up. People speculate, since this is batch one, so people speculate that David Stewart, so like I said, this was a switch over, was about 2014-15. This batch one came out about 15. That this was kind of still some leftover barrels that were quite aged, like 40 years plus. And this has, a soft nose, and the mid palate to finish is just wonderful. It's caramel and honey, a little bit of green apple in it, but it's just smooth. It is. There was a beginner Scotch. I'm not sure you want to pour this for that person because it's too expensive, but man, they would love it.
Yeah, this is $1,500 a bottle, give or take.
Yeah.
On the
It
secondary
is now.
market.
I don't think I paid for it back then because I got it back then.
Right.
But they're up to batch 9 now, or 8 or something like that in the 1509 series. So yeah, it's 10. It was bottled 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a limited production. It's truly that one batch, and once it's gone, it's gone. It's not like they can pull it out and do it again. So the quantity, the availability becomes less.
Yeah, and all scotches, almost without exception, are 86 proof, and so they're not high alcohol content. These are going to match that. And so when you get your nose in there to get the nose of the scotch, like most scotches, it's just so clean. It's not going to bite you with alcohol. Like, we've gotten into some of these that are like, whoa, be careful before you do that.
Yeah, burn your nose hairs.
Yeah, and particularly with Speyside, it's very citrus forward. You may not be able, I can't name exactly what those citrus fruits may be, but there's a hint of a number of them, and that's so kind of their style of Speyside, and this is exactly that. So clean nose.
Yeah, clean. And again, I go back, I taste a lot of honey, a lot of lavender in there, and I don't know if I've ever put those two words together in a spirit before. It's unique. It's if you see it somewhere, definitely worth the taking.
I will say, if I'm comparing the two, I prefer the Portwood.
If you want more of that peat, smoke, dirt, whatever you want to call it, the Portwood has a little bit more of that and has a little bit more spice to it.
But to be clear, relative to what you think of as Scotch, there's a hint of it.
Yeah.
It's not flavored that way.
No, it is not. It is the lightest peat you could get in a Scotch.
Yeah, absolutely. Circling back, you're talking about our parents and that aging process. It's difficult with whatever you choose to do or have to do is really the position. I think, one, you can't shirk that responsibility. I have siblings, and living hours away from where my mom did, one of my sisters became the primary caregiver. Not a responsibility she wanted, but, my parents raised responsible kids, so she did what she needed to do. And, tried to show that gratitude as much as we could. But it's usually, and I'm curious from your take, it's usually left to one child as to who's making most of those decisions. Would you think that's true?
Yeah, I think it's usually somebody's willing to pick up the ball and run with it is what it ends up to being the situation. Ideally, I think, it would be more of a shared responsibility. Okay, great. She lives with your sister. Maybe you help with some of the financial burden, like, you're not necessarily you, but somebody gives money to help. There's costs there,
Right.
Not just, for obvious expenses like medical expenses or whatever, but there's just the expenses of, food, groceries,
Right.
just whatever, shopping. They need that help.
Yeah, and my sister had power of attorney, so she could make those decisions. My wife does with her mother. And my wife has siblings, but my wife has really become the caretaker of most of her family. Her father died years ago, so the care of her mother has really been, a key through that. But regardless of the decisions that have to be made, who makes them, it's hard. There are no easy or right answers. I've been through this. I think you're in the beginning process of
But
doing this.
you are, be honest with you, and like all our podcasts, we don't really plan these things out. We just sit on the porch, talk about life. In all honesty, I hold you as a plumb line or a banner for how to take care of aging parents. I mean, you guys built onto your house. You when you call it the barnuminium or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, y'all have really gone all out for honoring your parents, and so hats off to you guys for doing that, because you and Catherine have really gone out of your way and really opened your house. I think that's ideally in other cultures, especially like the Asian culture. That's just kind of the standard thing.
Right.
I think it was true in older times. Multiple generations will live in the same house. But in this American world, for better or worse, that's not typical of the thing.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And we know those decisions are hard. And we know many of our listeners are faced with them or have been through that. So we recognize that. And I think honor, the word you use, that's the benchmark. Try to honor your parents through that process. Thank you for joining us today, by the way. Two Guys on a Porch. Come back next time.
Don't forget, before you check off, like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you'd like to see next, what you'd like to see us drink, or tell us what your favorite drink is, and we'd like to try what you like. Come back and see us, Two Guys on a Porch.
Life is much better with friends, a drink, and cigar, and some Two Guys on a Porch swag.
Let us know what your drink and cigar of choice is at twoguysonaporch.com, and you'll be entered into a drawing to get some Two Guys on a Porch swag